New for 2021, RockShox are launching 2 new forks and a new shock as well. So the first fork is the SID Ultimate SL, which they're claiming is the lightest weight cross-country fork on the market. It's got 100mm of travel and it weighs 1,330 grams. Then there's the new SIDLuxe shock and the SID Ultimate, which is what we're going to spend most of our time talking about today. The new SID Ultimate from RockShox costs £869 and has 120mm of travel. It'll only work with 29-inch wheels. There isn't a 650B model, as RockShox claim that there's a significant drop-off with the smaller wheel bikes in this sort of segment especially, and it uses a shorter 44mm offset, which again RockShox is saying that's where they're seeing the industry go. So in theory it should give you a bit better stability at higher speeds compared to a longer offset fork. And though you won't really be able to see it properly while it's bolted onto the bike, there's no carbon steerer here and no carbon crown. RockShox decided just to focus purely on aluminium. So instead what you've got is a heavily machined crown to save as much weight as possible without reducing the stiffness. And it's anodized rather than painted. Now the big thing here is the SID Ultimate is built around 35mm upper tubes, or stanchions if you want to call them that. The SID SL still uses the 32mm stanchion, so it is a bit lighter, and that's what I guess most of the pros are going to use for racing World Cups. But this new fork uses the wider diameter stanchions, which add a bit more stiffness and steering accuracy to proceedings. As a result of what we're seeing the current pros race on, it feels like we're now getting a bit more momentum behind these short travel bikes, where although they only maybe have between 100 and 130mm of travel, they're spec'd so they can handle a lot more demanding terrain. That means a stiffer fork, better tyres with a bit more grip and a softer compound tread, as well as shorter stems and wider bars for the ultimate control. Obviously, this fork is still designed to be ridden in a cross-country setting, whether that's all-day epics or just, cross-country racing. So weight is still of paramount importance. The SID Ultimate weighs in at 1,537 grams, while the SID Ultimate SL weighs 1,330 grams and is claimed to be the lightest fork on the market. In a bid to create the Ultimate fork, RockShox have properly gone back to the drawing board with this one. So that means it's got a whole new air spring and a whole new damper. RockShox were aware that with the original debonair spring, the fork would naturally sag under the bike's own weight. And with only 100 or 120mm of travel, it meant that maybe riders didn't feel that they were getting the most of all of that travel. So in a bid to maximise that 120mm of travel, what they've done is they've moved the bypass port slightly lower in the upper tube. Now that means at full extension, both the positive and negative pressures are equalised. The idea being that the fork should ride a little higher in its travel, but still remain supple off the top, so it should still be really sensitive, just like we've seen with the Lyric and the Pike. RockShox have also switched to the same top-out bumper as used in the Pike and the Lyric, and they've got a new, lighter and smaller seal head too. Another key element of the SID Ultimate is the new Charger race day damper, which weighs a really impressive 96 grams. To reduce weight, what RockShox have done is reduce the fluid or oil volume. Now, that's a tricky thing to balance because you need enough in there to ensure that the fork won't overheat on long, rough trails, but also this is where I guess a lot of the weight will come from. What RockShox have done here to keep the weight low is to reduce the oil volume. Now, it's a tricky balancing act because you need enough oil in there to maintain consistent damping on long, extended, rough descents, but also that's where you're going to save the grams. So compared to a standard Charger damper, the Charger Race Day has smaller seals, but RockShox claim that it won't affect performance in any way. There's also a bleed port on top, just in case you need to burp bleed the damper and get it feeling 100% again. And what's really interesting here is the Charger Race Day damper is actually backwards compatible, so you can fit it into other SID forks all the way back to the 2014 edition. In terms of adjustment, we've got a 2-position compression lever on the top of the fork, so that's either open or lock. For a bit extra money, you can actually get a twist lock remote attached to it, so you don't ever have to take your hands off the bars. And we've got low-speed rebound damping on the bottom. So as you can see, there aren't actually any big dials on here. So in a bid to save weight, RockShox have gone as minimal as possible. So the compression lever is just a heavily machined tiny little lever, which is easy enough to grab and twist, but it isn't your big dial like you might normally see, where the whole cap would twist normally. And the rebound adjuster is in fact just a small Allen key. Now this Allen key pops out the base of the fork and can actually be used to adjust the rebound on the SIDLuxe shock, which again doesn't have an adjuster to save weight. Other things that I need to mention include the SKF seals, which are a low friction seal which helps to keep the fork feeling really sensitive, as well as the switch to Maxima plush fluid, which should help keep damping consistent, help reduce friction further, and also reduce seal wear. One other neat little feature that RockShox have included on the SID is this integrated fender. So all it is two small bolts at the back of the fork arch, so you can just attach it nice and easily. Once in place, it seems to work pretty well, to be fair. Well, we've just focused today on the ultimate version of this fork. Both the SL and this fork are also available in the Select models. These are a bit cheaper because they use the Charger RL damper rather than the race day damper used in the Ultimate editions. The SID SL Select fork will set you back £579, while the burlier SID Ultimate fork will set you back £679. Now I'm going to move on to ride impressions. Now, while I did want to get a full review done of this fork before the embargo lifted, I did have a bit of a problem. I wanted to do back-to-back testing with the Fox 34 step cast, but unfortunately the wheel isn't compatible. That's because the wheel I have on this bike uses torque caps and it won't fit into the Fox fork. So while I have actually ordered the DT parts to fit this hub, they still haven't arrived, so I haven't had a chance to actually get on the hill and do some proper back-to-back testings. So while this is only going to be my initial impressions, keep an eye out for a full review on BikeRadar.com because I will be following this up very, very shortly. After a bit of experimentation, I ended up settling on 70 PSI in the fork with no bottomless tokens in there because it felt like it was progressive enough as it was. It feels more solid and probably more capable than the 120mm might have you think. I've ridden it on everything from standard sort of trail center loops to off-piste, more sort of downhill orientated trails, and it's always really sort of held its own. It feels accurate, it feels like it's stiff enough, but it doesn't feel like it's deflecting so much that it hurts my hands. That said, on really big hits, I'm still yet to get the full 120mm of travel. Now, I'm not far off, we're talking millimeters here. It just goes to show that at 68 kilograms, I don't need a token in there to get it to ramp up hard enough because it already seems to do that for me. One thing I would say is that the rebound adjustment, it does feel a little odd twiddling an Allen key to make those changes. It works totally fine, but like I said, it's a little strange. And I found that I've had to do a little bit of playing around, getting the fork to feel like it can rebound fast enough. And when I set it to how I originally wanted it, there is a very slight top out to it, but it's not in any way a harsh sort of thunk, you know, metal on metal, pulling the fork apart. You can just feel it as it extends, maybe a little more so than you would on a pike, for example. On the whole though, when you really push this fork hard, it does feel incredibly capable, and it definitely feels like it punches well above its 120mm travel. On really repetitive, chattery sort of terrain that you might find on a really weathered trail centre, for example, it's impressive just how comfortable the new SID is. I felt like even on really extended descents, the control just remained and I didn't get too much vibration through my hands, which was really important, especially if you've got another lap to do or the descent keeps going and going and going. In terms of climbing, while I didn't go for the twist lock remote, just to adjust the compression on the top there, that's just down to personal preference, and I just wanted to keep my controls as clean as possible. But I had no problem reaching down for that compression lever. Once it's engaged, it's a really solid feel, properly locks the front end out, which is perfect for stuff like fire road drags where you don't want the fork to bob, or long sections of road, and it really is a proper energy saver. Just like when it came to settling on a spring pressure, I also took a bit of time to work out how much rebound damping I wanted to use. I normally like to run my fork relatively fast in terms of return speed, so It will track the ground as accurately as possible but remain controlled. Now, using the Allen key, using the small Allen key that's inserted in the bottom of the damper to adjust it, maybe doesn't feel quite as comfy as using a regular rebound dial, but it's still totally fine and it still worked perfectly well. But what I did feel is if I ran too little rebound damping, so the fork was a little too fast, you would definitely feel a very soft top out at full extension. So just when you're pulling up into a manual or lifting up over some roots, it's just a very soft touch. You can definitely feel it, but it does mean, you know, you're getting that 420 mil of travel. So it's no bad thing, and it's by no means a deal breaker when it comes to making those buying decisions. Overall then, my initial experience on the new SID Ultimate is really positive. It feels like it's more than capable when it comes to going downhill. It's really comfortable, really controlled. It sits high enough in the travel that you don't feel that you're maybe losing that dynamic geometry that adds to stability and the confidence you need to really push on when you are going downhill. It seems to handle all the harsh, chattery, rocky stuff that I've ridden really well. It feels like it's stiff enough that I can slam it into turns and it still feels like I've got that sort of accurate, precise steering feel that I really do look for in a fork. And obviously it's a really light fork too, so it means that if you are looking to build a bike up that you can ride all day on, but you still have that sort of confident feel at the front, it's definitely worth looking at. Okay, so that's my initial impression of the new SID Ultimate fork. As I've already said, I'm going to be doing a full review very soon, so keep an eye out for that. But what do you guys think of it? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell icon so you know every time we upload a new video.